I've got news for you and none of it's good. Hey, none of it's good. Hey, none of it's good. Hey! Welcome to another deeply depressing episode of the Ranger Gareth podcast. I am your host, Gareth. Musical accompaniment was also provided by Gareth, and today we are going to talk about Ontario gutting the Endangered Species Act. So for anyone that is not aware, anyone that's from around the world, Ontario is Canada's largest province by population. And they're making some controversial changes to their Endangered Species Act. This has led to a range of protests and open letters from concerned citizens and environmental advocacy groups. Ontario currently has a conservative government led by Doug Ford. So for any international listeners, Canadian Conservatives tend to be center-right with a focus on encouraging big business and reducing environmental red tape. Which is unfortunate because conservative and conservation share the same linguistic root, but apparently that is just one of the things that they do not having a tough time squaring that circle. So the Endangered Species Act of 2007 is the act that is being replaced by something called the Species Conservation Act. So this covers topics such as the original act from 2007 covers topics such as how different species at risk are classified, like endangered or threatened or at risk or vulnerable, similar to the IUCN classification. Oh God, what is that acronym again? International Union for the Conservation of Nature, I believe. But Ontario's classification is similar to how those are classified. The act also covers how species are downlisted when they are no longer endangered. There's a prohibition on killing or capturing listed species, which, makes sense. The creation of a species at-risk conservation fund, sections on enforcement or investigation of the act, and a list of special orders that can be placed, including the Species Protection Order and the Habitat Protection Order. Those orders are pretty much exactly what they sound like. So you realize that there's a project happening and there's a rare type of habitat there. All right, a special order is going to be made to protect that chunk of habitat. Species that are classified as endangered are listed by COSWIC. We love our acronyms here. The Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada. Now, one of the most controversial aspects of this removal is the delisting of 106 threatened species, including the eastern musk turtle and the red-headed woodpecker. Now, keep in mind, the Endangered Species Act is still a powerful tool, as shown by the story of an Ontario company that was charged $50,001 for developing a site that was home to the endangered Butler's garter snake. So, I read the article a couple days ago. I'm just going to go by memory. A site in Ontario was purchased by a numbered company. That numbered company did an environmental assessment. Their ecologist or environmental assessor, I forget the exact job title, discovered several endangered Butler's garter snakes on the site, which meant that they needed special permission and a special plan in order to develop the site. That numbered company sold that site to a new numbered company, which I think sold it to another numbered company after that. And then that company went ahead and developed the site without doing any of the environmental protection facts or environmental protection orders that were needed for this endangered snake. Now, the company's argument was that they were not aware of the endangered snakes there. Previous company, I guess, did not pass on the information that there was the endangered snake there, but the government's argument was that as the landowner, it is your job to ensure that do your due diligence, and when in doubt, consult the government again and get someone to do your own environmental assessment. This company just kind of went ahead and did the development. So they were charged I believe the owner of the company was charged a nominal $1 fee, but the other $50,000 was split into four $12,500 yearly installments to be paid to a conservation fund in order to, I guess, maybe protect habitat in the future. There have been a lot of big environmental changes coming through Ontario. I remember there was a story I talked about during a previous episode where there was a beach town somewhere in Ontario that had endangered birds that lived on the shores, and that endangered bird area was protected by a park but then the city wants to take over that area so they can manage it themselves, which is leading to a lot of people being concerned because the city might be more focused on garnering tourist dollars than protecting a rare bird. So there's a lot going on there. There's always a bit of tension between business and environment. I'm going to flip over to the Eco Justice article. Obviously, a biased source, but they have their own prerogative. Ford government cuts Endangered Species Act, slashes wildlife protections in Ontario. So, oh, and I just love the dystopian naming. It's like the really creative names that they give the act in government to make it seem more palatable. So, the Ford government announced the Protect Ontario by Unleashing Our Economy Act 2025. This would repeal the Ontario Endangered Species Act and replace that with the Species Conservation Act. There would also be the Special Economic Zones Act, legislation that would allow the provincial cabinet to create law-free zones for designated zones and project proponents. The bill would abandon Ontario's commitment to protecting species and ensuring their recovery. The Species Conservation Act would replace the strict criteria for habitat protection with a discretionary regime. This regime would offer very limited protection to only a tiny fraction of the habitats species need to survive and recover. For example, the bill would narrow the definition of habitat for animals to exclude areas outside of dwelling places and the immediate area around it. For example, the habitat for a fox consists only of its den and an area essential to its den. The den would have to be currently occupied or habitually occupied. The new legislation would also eliminate provincial protection for federally listed migratory birds and aquatic species, many of which are not adequately protected under federal legislation, leaving significant gaps. Then we get down to what the bill proposes to do, so gutting environmental assessment processes, fast-tracking mining and infrastructure development, including in ecologically sensitive and contested areas like the Ring of Fire, without proper consultation or consent from Indigenous communities. And I had to look up what Ontario's Ring of Fire was, but it sounds like it is an area of Northern Ontario that looks very promising for mining. It has a vast supply of critical minerals, allegedly, such as chromite, copper, nickel, platinum, and titanium. It's located more than 500 kilometers northeast of Thunder Bay and currently has an active claim area about 8,000 kilometers in size. These minerals would be necessary for things like cell phones, computers, medical devices. So obviously a lot of money to be made up there. The bill also proposes to adopt a register first, ask questions later model for species at risk permits, allowing developers to proceed before environmental implications are fully known, and establishing special economic zones where cabinet can exempt areas and companies from applicable laws, a move that raises serious concerns around transparency, accountability, and environmental stewardship. So for anyone in Ontario or even the rest of Canada that is not a fan of this, submit your comments on the Eco Justice petition. If you're in Ontario, speak to your MLA, or I guess they have an MPP, Member of Provincial Parliament. And the Narwhal also did a pretty good article about the Endangered Species Act. I'm just going to scroll down to a specific section because apparently there's been a lot of focus on Highway 413 and a fish known as the red-side dace. So according to the province's own accounting, biodiversity in southern Ontario is estimated to be worth $84.4 billion per year. That was in 2008 dollars, so $122.5 billion today, accounting for inflation. That is the value of its provision of fresh water, nutrient cycling, carbon storage, flood control, pollination, culture, tourism, and aesthetics. So for anyone that's not really in the environmental world, there's a concept called ecosystem services, which are essentially what does the environment do for us for free and how much would it cost us if we were to do it ourselves. So, for example, wetlands helping with flood mitigation. They store the water in swamps and in the ground, and then eventually the water gets slowly released back out to the rest of us. Whereas if we had to do it all with man-made infrastructure, it would cost, several $billions. Same with water filtration, goes up in the sky, falls down, filtered through plants. You have nice, fairly clean rivers. Hard to, I guess, have a human equivalent for tourism. Highway 413 crosses both. So in January, the federal fisheries and environment ministers issued a critical habitat order for red-side dace, a tiny endangered minnow threatened by development in southern Ontario, and Highway 413 in particular. The fish is federally protected, and the order states that the Endangered Species Act affords the minnow and its habitat additional provincial protection. Red-side dace have become a poster child for the fight against Highway 413. The 60-kilometer proposed route rings around the suburbs north and west of Toronto, crossing 85 waterways and the habitats of the butternut tree, the rabbit's clubtail butterfly, the western chorus frog, and 7 species of birds in addition to the red-side dace. Under the Endangered Species Act, the province established specific rules and best practices for protecting red-side dace, such as techniques for installing sediment control fencing, but provincial protections for red-side dace disappear under the Species Conservation Act. The silver minnow with a slash of red across its side is still protected under the Federal Fisheries Act, so any project that may harm it or its habitat must still receive a Fisheries Act authorization or a Species at Risk Act permit, but these rules have been in effect for years and failed to protect red-side dace. They lost a staggering 81% of their population from 2001 to 2017. And also for the 7 species of bird that are also at risk living along there, there's the bobolink, chimney swift, bank swallow, wood thrush, eastern meadowlark, barn swallow, and olive-sided flycatcher. But they'll also be excluded from protections under the new provincial act. The butternut tree would only be protected around its roots on provincial and private land. The rabbit's clubtail dragonfly would likely lose protection on provincial and private lands, and the area it forages and travels, activities which are no longer part of the new definition of habitat. So it just puts more onus on the federal government to do their job properly. Now it's very clear the provincial government has complete disdain for any of these values along the highway, and the federal government will have to carry all the weight in ensuring that these species are not eradicated. Great. All right, so when in doubt, trust the feds. I don't know. This is a tough one. I tend to prefer local enforcement with larger scale oversight. I like to think that local groups would have a greater concern for what's happening in their area, but again, it's just that constant push-pull between environment and economics. So let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know how you feel about this. I think this is going to be messy. I feel like there are going to be a lot of court battles coming up, and sadly, I think we're going to see more species go extinct. So sorry to end on doom and gloom. Hopefully the next episode is happier. See you next time.